really the question how the antiquity will help to shape our future. So museums are laboratories, also social laboratories, which adapt somehow to our society. For example, our society is getting much more diverse. So this diversity is very important to accept it as an enrichment for society.
How could we change society? How could we work with copies or facsimiles in museums? How could we reinvent an institution like a museum?
New conditions. And so all the performances and all these things took place in the same building.
Refugees coming and trying to find a center. Here in the space you can see even this chest. People came, putting all their belongings inside a small, chest and bringing them over. The title unauthorized, because they were outside of the legal first plan of the city, exists since then. In the 50s, Greece was part of the Marshall Plan. As you know, Documenta was part of this plan in the rebuilding process of castle after the Second World War. So what happened in Athens, and it was interesting, is instead of rebuilding all this neoclassical architecture, Greece borrowed the solution, the European solution of architecture, and this notion of the Corbusier of the concrete frame, and rebuilt the halls of Greece and the Athens.
There are so many different layers of time on top of each other, the ancient times and the contemporary time and all what has been in between, and also the wounds of history, which you can also feel and see, especially also the contemporary wounds. And then you have Acropolis here, which is also the result of a wound, of a victory over a loss, and then you have the contemporary wounds, and that of course also gives hope.
You can see how they exhibit the works, and at the same time it's a storage, how they preserve it and how they do research, and it's very transparent, and that's what I like about the museum here.
We just have simple stones in an open storage. If we look closer into the objects, we find the story of the vocal alphabet being invented in Greece. You can just say the vocal alphabet was invented because they just need a technical functioning alphabet, or you can tell the story the other way around, that the vocals were needed, that you could hear the sound and could transport the sound of poems, especially of love poems, throughout time. And I think that's a good metaphor of what we're actually doing. We have objects in our museums, and it's all about what narratives we want to tell. Not only what is the factual history of the objects, it's what do they have to do with our own time, what can they tell us in a contemporary way.
Classical is a categorization that people put onto it rather than what it is. I mean, this is beyond, you don't even need to say anything about it. I mean, it's the presence, it's just enough. Going to move any minute, no? Actually, it looks like it's moving. It's amazing. It's completely crazy. I think that the way that it's displayed, for some reason, I don't know why, allows you to get in touch with it much better than in other places. No?
Actually, the exhibition here in Odeon actually dismantled the show, and you will find around the studio tour here at Odeon instruments, scores that are showing empty stages or stages that cannot connect.
How different it is to think of the future of museum, to think what a museum is or should be from the perspective of a universal museum. The relationship of the art today to the art market is a very complex, is a very inevitable link. Actually, in a good way, I'm saying it. I mean, one needs the other, but their nature is completely different. So, what is problematic is if the art market overrules, the whole system of art. How can we decolonize? What that does mean? How can we connect with what's going on in the world?
I'm looking like with two eyes, because I learned how is the cities, and I learned how is the villages or community peoples. For me, it's very different, not like urban peoples, and where I put together and in same level. I'm from small village, and when I was young, every time I had the contact with the tree, with the art, and learn like the winds, different winds, and the arts now is in the galleries, and you see like baskets or woods in the gallery. The high class, lowly class is very separate sometimes, and the same in the academics. Who is professional, who is not professional? For me, it's very difficult. Say something we are going this way, but for me, it's very important to have horizontal visions. We are working together here, and the Museal Episódios open this door, different doors, and these doors give you different information. And this information, how I transfer in the communities, how I transfer for rural areas.
Εδώ όσοι πέρασαν βασανίστηκαν πάρα πολύ.
Can really learn how important information and the archive is. So we learned here today that during the dictatorship in Greece, so starting with the coup d'etat in the year 67, so 50 years ago, so many people were tortured, also many women among them, and we are here in a museum. So there are still people who can tell the stories about the experiences here, and they stress how important it is that the buildings, the rooms still exist. It's so important to not to lose this memory, to not let it repeat.
The number of people that have been executed around this area, because the area of very active resistance, it's thought to be more than 350 people.
The existence of these buildings as a site, keeping them integral part of our thinking and our understanding of today is very crucial. As people working in the field of art, producing different sensibilities, I think one of our main responsibilities is to really help developing different ways of integrating those sites of memory in our day without victimizing ourselves, without capitalizing on victims.
Good evening, everybody.
This has been definitely a learning process for me. So coming here to Athens, I came with a certain level of experience and knowledge, but as usual, life teaches you things, and Athens has definitely taught me things. When I first came, I was interested in the immigrant and refugee situation. This project, this community, helped me understand that the refugee and immigrant issue is not relegated strictly to the refugees, immigrants. It's very much connected to the native people of the place where they are. And that was one of the first things that I learned about this project in this community. If you only look at what they can offer from the standpoint of an economic perspective, you won't find any value. But if you can start looking at their culture, their language, their history, and all that they bring with them, then you can start to see some of their values. So that was the point, to try to do that. And so I wanted to create a space that would allow for creative ideas to come and interact and try to find solutions or bring resources to the issues that were being faced here. My goal has always been to be a resource for communities that want to engage in that third way, of trying to think about, what it is that you want within your community and how do you organize yourself to get it. And first you have to start to communicate with each other and talk to each other and start building those relationships.
I think it doesn't matter if Rick Lowe's project is an artwork or not, to me. But what matters the most is what art can allow to happen. And so what I really was witnessing there, because I was, there were these women doing Zulu dance, which was totally not Zulu dance at all. Not at all, And it was quite amazing because I was like, that's not Zulu
And
dance.
they were from where?
Well, and in that space, you kind of witness the Senegalese drum, with the Zulu drum, and then this dance, which is totally remixed and translated differently, and it's like it's really that space of translation, or the untranslatable perhaps, and I think it's more like about this. It's unknowing grammar of inhabiting a community or with a community that also perhaps becomes a metaphor for our meetings here as people who came from different perspectives.
He was playing a lot in his life with this kind of need to assert a kind of spiritual authority and the continuation of certain spiritual practice within his community.
The idea of Christos Papoulias was a proposal for the Acropolis Museum, a museum that should not impose itself hegemonically into the land, but that should be digged out under the Parthenon itself. The Acropolis, it's not just a temple. The Parthenon on its own, together with the rock, was a kind of an experience. All together, we are doing this kind of entropic movement towards the future by digging into the future, or in reality digging into the past. the idea was to somehow connect Documenta and get my colleagues in the process of discovering the city throughout its different layers. This kind of think tank, a nomadic observatory at the same time, a nomadic way of psychoanalysis, creative thinking, discussing around the idea of museums, but also decolonizing ourselves.